go. That didn't work. Hello and welcome to Autodidactic Alchemist. And we're all ready and waiting, of course. We weren't stunned at all by that. All right, we've got two special guests with us today. We've got Andrea Zertis with us and Ben from Analog. Analog, what's it called? You're on Twitter mainly? What's your Twitter?
Waking up with Analog.
Yeah. Waking up with Analog. There we go. All righty, so welcome everyone. Welcome, Bern. How are we all?
Super stoked to have the chance to be together with you guys again, and especially nice to have Analog included this time because it does feel like we're all different colors of the spectrum of the story, and like everything that Analog you've been doing for the last 4 years at least, probably longer now, is just now. People are just now getting ready to kind of like start looking into that. I mean, you have people that are hitting us up saying, "Hey, I found out my grandfather was an orphan who was on the orphan train." So the work that you're doing is actually, it's not just metaphorical. It actually is impacting the lives of so many people.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, I mean, we've met each other, 5 years ago now, almost 4 years. So it's been a long time, but yeah. Busy. Life is busy. I got 3 little kids, 3 little boys. So
yes.
Thank you for being able to juggle that and still make it on tonight. We appreciate it.
Totally.
And I've just recently become aware of your work, Ben, through Old World Florida's channel, as well as I am how do you
Kairos?
say it?
Yeah.
Kairos, yes. And just the amount of digging and research and articles and old newspaper reports of these different alternative history topics, findings, the giants, and all of it that you have,
and all right in the newspaper. It's right there written.
Yeah. I mean, it's I've just come across your work too, and it's just such an obvious thing, right? Go through the newspapers, and so I didn't realize you got 4 or 5 years or more of research. I've got a lot of reading to do because this is the thing, right? It's always in the newspaper. I've got some of the old giant clippings, but I haven't done a lot of research. I always come across them in Trove and stuff, and you just get so much print. I'm just like, I just can't.
Yeah. Well, when I first met Andreas, I mostly was just clipping from my own personal library, my own actual physical library. And I was just getting into the digital stuff. And I met Andreas and Victor, who's a good friend of mine as well. Yeah. And
we got to get him on soon. He's almost ready.
Man, we should get him on.
Victor's fantastic. I did about a year of co-hosting Radio Tartaria with him. And at that time, I was already reading a lot of newspapers, but I wasn't really putting them out in the public. But yeah, now I've got over 6,000 posts, and I'd say 90% of those are newspapers. I've read probably 12,000 papers at this point. So yeah, and it's all over the world, but mostly America. But yeah, it's the stuff I've found is pretty nuts.
So like, for instance, 5 years ago or so, when you started doing a lot of the stuff on like orphan trains and getting into that, like I was saying, people are now finding out that their families came from these kids. And you can only go so far back with your genealogy stuff before it becomes very obvious that there are kids that were brought back and forth. And they're like, how are they coming from the other side of the world? Like, well, you have to check the newspapers. And especially if you check Analog's work, you can see systematically where they took kids from Russia, brought them to Canada, brought kids from Canada back to Russia. And I'm sorry, I know you've found even weirder examples like in Argentina and Australia. But I mean, there's a bunch of kid swapping going along. And then there's all these pictures of them being put into these work camps, like have them build the new bridge or something. It's like, where are all these kids getting jobs? Well, where are these kids coming from?
Yeah. Worldwide, the labor force, which is, 4 or 5 years ago, Andreas, when we were first talking about this stuff, no one was talking about it. Minds Unveiled, shout out Minds Unveiled. He just did a fantastic
video. Cabbage Patch video, right?
Which is exactly what we were talking about.
Right, yeah.
He hadn't even seen my video, and we've been talking, and we've had a lot of syncs.
Have you come across anything to do with that, Ben? Like with the Cabbage Patch Kids? Like,
oh yeah, that me and Andre my oldest video
Oh, you have.
is with Andreas, and it covers the exact same thing. Yeah,
Right. What's the name of that lady? Because she was like a new World's Fair exhibit person, and she did all these pictures, the cabbage babies thing. And there are a lot of people have those pictures in their homes and calendars, right? So people were saying, "Oh, these pictures have been doctored." It's like, no, like those are the originals.
Well, and I can attest to some of this with my own family. My dad's side came from Poland. They're Austrian, and their immigration papers to Quebec, they're labeled as Tartars on the immigration papers. Also, my mother's side, her father, who is Scottish, there were a ton when my wife is Mormon, and someone high up in the church who's in charge of the genealogy department, my wife, as a Christmas present, had my family lineage done. And this woman has access to, the largest collection of family lineages in the world. And she showed me all these anomalies in my own family. And my grandfather my great-grandfather, they had a family farm in northern Georgia that was in the family for over 200 years. And they had tons of kids that they were getting off the orphan trains to help on the farm. And it's in the census because I know who my actual great uncles are. But on the census papers, they were just essentially adopting. They had 12 children according to the census, but only 4 of them were blood. And digging, that they were just getting people off the trains.
Were the LDS?
Is that why we hear of these massive families? Sorry, Andreas.
They basically took them on as farmhands, but they were 13, 14 years old.
They become part of the family, right? Do they adopt them? Is that what happens?
Correct. The theory from my own family is that some of them were actually blood, and indentured servitude was a way of getting people to America. So there's a positive spin to it that you had to falsify, because my mom's mom is a Cherokee Indian, part Cherokee Creek, and her father was Jewish, and they fled England, Scotland, because not only were the Jews being expelled from, the famous expulsion in 1492, but they were being pushed out of all of Europe. And that's another thing that's really interesting about the Mormon connection, because we talked about this before we went live, but I didn't really summarize it. Most of the families that were on the wagon trails to Salt Lake were Sephardic Jews, crypto Jews, Jewish people.
Wow.
Latinos.
That were being persecuted. Their families were being killed. And they found a religion, which, if you study Mormonism, Joseph Smith's version of Mormonism before he was killed, and Brigham Young kind of twisted his teachings a little bit, you'll find a lot of overlaps with Hebrew Old World Judaism. But yeah, so that's what a lot of the repopulating was you had a lot of people fleeing the Catholic Church. Non-conversos were being murdered, essentially. But yeah, so that was a long roundabout way of getting back to the orphan trains, the baby farms, which my video with Exertus was about baby farms, but it covered many topics. And all the royalty of Europe, Catholic royalty, or people that converted to Catholicism, they had baby farms. And some of them were, what was it, like 15, 20,000?
Right. Lots and lots of, and then they'd use the women themselves and the thing. And it gets so much more convoluted, right? Because you just brought up the fact that some of these people were converted to Catholicism, lots of them were. So we're not sure exactly how long this has been going, or maybe this is a thing that happens every reset, that they have a baby farm that they take over.
Exactly.
Okay, so can we talk about what's a baby farm? Who are we talking? Royals are running them, and what are they doing? Populating, using them for workforce or something?
Correct.
And colonization, like
It
full
was
communities.
exactly. There's the big one, colonization. So when
After a
the
reset.
thing that I think why that video was ahead of its time, and I think Andreas will agree, people, you have to have a really full spectrum view of Tartaria.
Yeah.
Full spectrum, not just buildings and
Right.
Antiquitech and reset. You need like everything to really be able to understand what was happening. Like you could postulate that these parents were being killed and that these babies were being stolen, or you could start to think, was there some kind of breeding program?
Is this incubation? Right.
Incubation, correct.
I mean,
Test
which they
tube-
have all these patent pictures. There's these weird drawings
So-
Victor would find about this.
Exactly. And you find a lot of clerical errors with the patents, with the incubators. But once you look into the expositions and you see the narrative and what's being really laid out in the exhibitions, it becomes a little more clear. And I think Andreas hit it perfectly there with these are repopulating tools. These people weren't necessarily interested in slave labor, although that was part of it. That was a big part of it, because the industries of America were being reconstituted with children. So these are buildings and tech that already existed. What happened to the people that, all this is conjecture, but it becomes even more of a gray area when you talk about where did the people go.
But it makes like a reset all the more plausible and possible by bringing in all of these babies as opposed to having the settled people or full families moving there and whatnot. And I just saw on Instagram today that there was also they used to legally deliver babies by U.S. postal mail as well, and that was another part of this.
Right. And for free originally, and then they started charging people for it, and so that's another weird thing. Why are you for free sending kids? And then the charge of it, was very nominal. But then they have these community fundraiser kind of things where they say, "Hey, orphan trains are coming to town. Go down. You need some kids. Come pick up some kids." Yep. And so I'm sorry because I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. I'd love to see Analog if you have any of the pictures of some of these newspaper clippings.
I wasn't ready to talk about orphans, so I don't have anything offhand. But go back and watch my video with Andreas. You can find it on his channel.
That's true. We have like a pretty solid video that covers all of this, and all the newspaper clippings are in it. I'll put a link in the description. I'll send you guys later.
Someone find the link.
But you'll definitely start to see these pictures of orphan trains. If you type in orphan train, at this point, the internet's starting to expunge.
When we did the video, there was almost nothing.
Right.
Like, that's again why I was using newspapers, because you could find quite a bit. But now it's just like you can find.
And a big thank you again to CJDV again for your support. Thank you very much. Just so, are you thinking with these farms? Are we talking test tube babies, or are we talking some kind of mass insemination program as well?
I think it's a little bit of both. There are regions like the Bolsheviks and I think world wars, especially World War One, were constituting certain things like this. A mother who had a child, even if she was married, if her husband died in the war, the church took the baby.
Right.
If there was only one parent, and this is not conjecture. This is historical fact, and it was in most of Europe, a lot of Europe, especially Catholically controlled.
A friend of mine, Ed Annunziata, the guy who made Echo the Dolphin, the Sega Genesis video game, his name Annunziata comes from the fact that his great whatever mother took the baby and put it into the mouth of this weird demon looking statue thing that opens on the other side of the cathedral, and then when you close it, the other side opens and the baby falls into the church. And so that's the Church of Annunziata.
Oh, wow.
And so there's like tens of thousands of people with that name, and there's a lot of examples like that.
Well, and didn't Jerry Seinfeld come out and say that his
he said that his dad or his I think it was his father, orphan trainer.
Right.
No, incubator baby.
Oh, incubator, yeah, sorry.
Oh, he did?
I think so. I think so, like a Coney Island one or something like that.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I don't think he was an orphan train. I think it was an incubator thing.
There's a lot of things that kind of, when you look into the swan myth, or sorry, the stork myth, and like the Slavs and the Slavic and Turks love with the stork, the idea of eggs being brought around, you know, like flown from place to place. They're like, storks are lucky. They're associated with chimneys. If they get their nest on your chimney, it means there's going to be great luck on your house. So there's a bunch of things tied to the stork being the ibis. And there's these old books like the Tartaria Bellicum and the Codex, the Cotton Codex, which have stories in them that refer to. And so again, Victor, with some of these pictures, we'd love to see again, machines for making babies, and babies are coming out of these machines. And it's, and so some people say it's an alchemical metaphor. You know, there's a lot of ways that British scholars hide what's going on, right? But they're babies, you know, and so the idea of creating lots of babies at once and then starting off new kinds of humans or augmenting humans for whatever period, right? This becomes into question. Are we under this thing that's wet wiring our brain and it's genetically modifying us? And if you look at all the different kinds of humans, like there's a point very recently where we have a lot of different kinds of bipedal hominids, you know, and you've got Neanderthal, Denisovan, Floriensis, and now we just call it Bigfoot and people dismiss it. But this isn't like a long line of things. These are all at the same time up until recently.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
I believe it was called like Homo gigantus or something like that, the larger hominid that they admit in the fossil records recently.
And that's the Peking man, and the Peking man is discovered by Pierre Teilhard Chardin, who is the Jesuit priest, basically from the Exorcist movie, but also the dude who brought evolution to the Catholic Church.
Ah, of course.
But yeah, I mean, we don't have to go too deep. I mean, we kind of just covered the point that you guys know there are baby trains, there were orphanages. The thing that I'm curious about is, what do you think was causing this repopulation? I mean, they talk about the plague, they talk about malaria, they talk about these huge wars and everything. Is any of that, are we going through, what's the reason why there's this collapse of population? Also, sterility is another question.
Radiation. Sterility is radiation. Plagues are radiation.
Boils in the face. All right.
Was Napoleon real? Probably not. I think Napoleon's comet was what was real. And comets cause earthquakes, volcanic eruptions. They're markers of pole shifts, the sun moving backwards, time slowing down, the sun changing colors, the sun disappearing for 3 days. Yeah, that's the IMCO, you know, the electromagnetic flip, is once you realize that we're definitely living in a closed vacuum and it's all electrical and we're all batteries essentially feeding a larger battery, that starts to make more sense. And when you've read as many articles as me and you realize the entire world is built on top of another world. Like in America, I can say specifically because I've covered papers in every state. There are cave systems in every single state in America that are monumental in size. And every military deep underground military base is old world that they've taken control of. And there's a lot of narratives about, you know, the U.S. military going to war with people underground and taking over those places, and nuclear tests have been hypothesized being destruction of certain bases underground. Right. And the places where these nuclear tests happen just happen to be some of the most incredible underground city articles I've found long before military had control of them. So, you know, connecting the dots.
I thought I might have been doing that.
The baby farm stuff makes more sense. That it's starting for me to seem logical to say that there was some kind of breeding program, and whether it was a machine or not, you know, the Romulus and Remus, you know, foundings of Rome, all these stories, you know, have big connections, and I think they're all kind of related. And it seems like great societies go underground, and it would seem likely that there's some kind of comet or apocalyptic, correct, And
So is that how you see this? As like, do you see it as like a cyclical kind of reset kind of system we're in, or some kind
definitely.
of and then basically people opportunists have sort of taken over at one of those resets? Is that kind
Correct.
of how you're going? Yep.
And you could think of the bloodline stuff being probably more related to to information. And when you look at the human race as a whole, and the amnesia being probably one of the most common things that keeps us from really understanding what happened. I'm of the opinion that my children and my ancestors were all kind of one conglomerate of knowledge, and through some event or breeding, we've forgotten or lost our connection with remembering.
And like a global genocide, almost of like a cultural global genocide, and essentially that could be part of where all the incubator babies or baby trains came from, was wiping out the parents and the knowledge and the cultures from before that.
Correct.
I mean, that's literally the story of natives in Canada.
Exactly. We still that's a great example, because that's the most recent example we have, where we still have people and children and adults who can speak openly about it, and have experienced it, right? But we're losing those people, because really it's about 100 years and before. So speculation is unfortunately becoming rampant in that, because there's just not a lot of people left.
Do you remember? Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was just, because earlier you were mentioning like underground cities and dumbs, and that got me thinking, because on Old World Florida, he's talking about this map from New Prussia, which you can associate with Philip K. Dick's Manor Castle and the Grasshopper Lies Heavy, which is the book inside of Manor Castle.
Yeah,
right?
I've read all his books. Amazing.
Good guy, Phil. The New Prussia map in Life magazine, which shows Japonica and New Prussia, also refers to Florida as Turconia and in the West Turkey for the Keys. Okay, so about the Persian Gulf and the Gulf Stream and the Mexican Gulf into the Gulf Stream. There's this whole thing where Finnish can. This is the map from Life magazine about what it would be like if we didn't help out in World War I and the Germans take over. Okay. Pretty more or less, and so. Basically, Canada is the barbarians, and New Prussia is America, and the American reservations down here in the old Mexican area, but Austriania, right? All these kinds of provinces.
Australia made it, man. Ooh.
And then of course, Turconia. So the idea that they're Turks, right? But it's interesting because we were looking, because we look at this map and the idea of the Murat and the Murat Straits and the Euphrates and the Mississippi River, which is the Nile here, in Missouri. And Missouri comes up all the time because of the Mormons, the Mormon War. The Mormons are the ones who take over the Moorish territories, right? After the Spanish-American War, they march through San Diego and they get Deseret going, which is interestingly like this area pretty much, right? Is that more or less?
Yeah.
And then there's the thing with the pyramids, the Missouri, the Muskogee. I think you were saying about the Muskogee pyramids, right? Pyre-centered buildings. So the Hopewell Mountains. So, I mean, what do you think about this idea? I mean, which cities, what are the important cities? You were saying, I think Missouri was the most important, right?
St. Louis.
St. Louis. Talk about it. Why?
Just obviously based on, it's one of the largest mound structures, but
why would they do this? This is obviously an occult symbol. Exactly.
The Silver Gate, right? You got the Silver Gate in St. Louis, the Golden Gate in San Francisco, and Lions Gate in Vancouver. So
this is arguably the coolest one, Omega symbol, because you've got. I mean, come on, what bridge looks like this more than that? This makes McDonald's envious. It is a terrifying sigil. Mm-hmm. It's amazing.
Well, and
thank you to Stefan and recent Tartarians too, by the way.
Right on. Yeah, I think also these are the
recent Tartarians. That's all you guys. Who is that? Is that Victor or someone?
No, it's Britt. Britt's the Truth Fairy.
Okay, Britt. Hey.
Oh, but yeah. I don't want to say one specific place is the most important, because really, it's the one thing that the whole world has in common is that we're standing on top of another civilization. And the Omega symbol is great because, you know, pre 1850, all of the Chinese had their tombs in the symbol of the Omega.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, who's Alpha and Omega? You know, that's a tangent we could go down. But, you know, Jesus and the door and Janus. You know, Janus is getting a lot more attention. I was talking a lot about Janus and Saturn years ago. Janus is the lodestone. He's the monad. Our realm is a monad with the central Meru. Meru is the magnetic mountain.
Yeah.
The term lodestone is something that's not a very popular term, but it governs everything. You know, our human, the two pillars, Janus, the two-faced god. It's magnetism. You know, positive, negative, red and blue. Yeah.
The lodestone is very much like Dr. Longo's stone anchors found all over.
Yeah, and the lodestone is all religions are based on a lodestone. The sacred stones, the Omphalos stone. The first king of Atlantis was a lodestone. Atlantis is concentric rings because of magnetism. The pearl represents the lodestone in an etheric way. Concentric rings, again, magnetism. They actually developed a device to test pearls, if they were real or fake pearls. And it basically was off of magnetism because they produce magnetism. They produce like a positive EMF field. Anyways, yeah, all religions, everything's based on the lodestone. And the lodestone is a worshipped living entity. People sacrificed on it. It was said that when the lodestone would lose its potency, it could be recharged with blood. What's blood? It's iron. The lodestones are iron stones. So these sacrificial stones are lodestones. They were deities. They were living. They were living things.
And crystal batteries, yeah.
Oh,
Well, 1
kids
second.
need
Parental responsibilities.
Right.
Right. So it's like
Crystal batteries, though. Think about the blood as the crystal in the stone, and the quartzing that has to take place. Stellium often talks about this, and so you've shown us with John Hutchinson, Bernie, like the videos on how to make a battery that grows. I mean, maybe this is a thing here about the center stone of these Antiquitechs, even that it's connected literally by charging of the stone. Probably, you know, maybe originally with just fertilizing, maybe of already dead animals or dead humans. I don't know.
Oh,
yeah. Or how, for instance, like in Mecca, how they all rotate around it, going in the circle with it. Is that charging at the EM field of life with it?
and are they going to walk the other way after a pole shift? That's the big question. I
wonder. Yeah, I mean, so the idea of the Kaaba stone is interesting because the idea there's like a meteor that is the center point, but then the idea that a meteor could just be a volcanic projectile is also a question because, like we said last time, looking at
okay, I hadn't thought of that.
Well, all that area, right? We talked about the Carolina Bays a little bit last time, like all these crazy, like meteor-looking holes that they say aren't meteors, and you know that would fit in with that idea. We said it could have been that they were ice that melted. That's like the science says maybe they were launched glacial pieces of ice or something. But
right. Like that's a good point. All of those little lakes that they're called like karst lakes, I think is the name of them, but they claim they're made by glaciers. But it's in all of the areas that the old Tartarian maps that show these castles and cities and civilizations like throughout Siberia, Alaska, all of that area, even Greenland, Iceland, far into the past, they now have all of these, they're just covered with these little circular lake indentations now. So something had to bombard the area
And
and
there's no
destroy it.
meteors in any of the holes.
Right. That's the fun part. It's very Grant Hancock. For decades, they're like, well, this was a wind. You know what I mean? Just relax.
It was wind.
And seriously, and then
Followed by
finally
rain.
they're like, okay, well, maybe it's a little bit of what you're saying, but definitely not the whole story. No. It was probably just, yeah, they can't handle it. That's for sure.
No, they can't handle the truth.
It's true. But then we look at the LiDAR pictures and it's even more absurd because, you look at these things like, what else could it be than something at an impact that hit it at an angle so that it's, look at it. It looks like something, you ever throw something and it doesn't make a perfect circle. It's like makes an egg because it kind of deepens. Okay. I see thousands of pieces of
impact, right? The direction of it and its inertia. That's where. And if they're all in the same direction, then it's like that's where the bombardment came from.
And if that's ice, that's a lot of ice is all I'm saying. I mean, that's like a lot of ice. That's crazy guns of that's like lakes of giant pieces of ice. I don't know. What's the
they just say ice because it's a way to explain that there's no rock, isn't it?
Right, exactly. That's the
and they claim that if pretty much 2 continents, like all of the northern Europe, Asia, and North America was covered by glaciers. Well, if it was a mile of ice, you're not going to find any civilization or proof of life around there, or societies and whatnot, or you won't be looking for it. Where in fact, all the maps, like these Tartarian maps, actually show that there were these cities, castles, and civilizations in these areas, and that we should actually be looking in this area because most likely it wasn't covered by ice. Not when they say it was.
Brit for 20. Wow, Burneye, thank you. You are the reason this is streaming on multiple channels. Everyone, make sure you like and subscribe his channel. Thank you for connecting so many intellects. Yes, we're going to make sure that we link in the description and show at the end the where to get crypto. Let's harken on that point again. Bernie, you are amazing, and I love what you do, and I'm proud to know you and work with you. And thank you so much for always being there, man. You're great.
Aw,
and you're good in hats.
I love all of you too.
And all right, but the only lie here is this. Come on, Greenland's not. At this point, where everything else was covered in ice, Greenland wasn't, and they're just kind of like.
All the maps say it wasn't, but also what about the the woolly mammoths, right? And all those kind of animals with the tropical plants undigested in their stomachs from Russia. At the same time, we've got that.
Here's a fun factoid. The resurrection of the gene that would have helped woolly mammoths tolerate cold turns out to be associated with the phytomelanin gene that makes red hair. See, apparently there were all different kinds of redhead, blonde, black-haired mammoths, whatever. But there were the redhead mammoths, and they were the only ones that could handle the extreme cold. And so the other ones died out. Yeah, so and then that's the same gene that they find in humans that have red hair.
Are they the ones they call rangamiths?
This I don't know.
Rangamith, I'm pretty sure it's a rangamith. Yeah,
that's a Rango moth. That can't be the way to spell it. I'm sorry. I apologize to everybody.
Oh my gosh, Clement. Is that how I say that? Baraza. Thank you so much. Wow, everyone for your support.
Wow, guys, this is awesome. Yeah, I don't remember the name Rangamoth, but that does sound like a pretty awesome monster, whatever it is.
I think redhead mammoth, man. It's a rangamoth.
But so it's fun because they'll tell you that one thing means that everything else is so. Okay, now Greenland's covered in ice too. Then, if we're going to admit that there was some ice in this area, and so
what? Who called it Greenland? Come on, who's colorblind? That's what I want to know.
You know what the story is? You know what they tell you? Do you know why they? So as a kid, the way that they told me in school to make me not ask questions, they're like, well, you see, the Vikings were really good salesmen. Right. And so what they did, not just with their sailing boats, selling it, they were saying, hey, go to Greenland. And then they're like, stay away from Iceland. Right. Because Iceland's our home. And it doesn't sound very good. It's covered in ice. I doubt it's true, but that's what they told me as a kid. I mean,
that's what they told you. Where do you live? Oh, we live in Iceland. It's so cold. Go to Greenland. Yeah, it's nice.
But they, Friesland, right, is the question in that whole thing.
And then Friesland as well, right? But Friesland,
so there's a part of Holland. Yeah, there's a
Big
part of
story.
Holland that speaks a completely different language, and it's likely
Yeah.
that they're the survivors of the lost island of
So
Frisia. Or Frisia is
exactly.
part of Wales, which is, you know,
I mean,
it
they'd
could
have to be, man, but they've got to be, and then that's tied into the Oralinda book as well.
Friesland, right? Is that how you spell it? There you go. Look at this.
Friesland, yeah.
So, but then, you know, then you got Friesland, and of course, you know, here's your map, here's your whole civilization. We show that it could have been off the coast of England, maybe northwest of England, of the United Kingdom islands.
Oh, is it like Doggerland?
So yeah, it's one of those kind of things. It's not Doggerland itself, but it is similar in the story.
Yeah,
Well,
because Doggerland.
Friesland, because Campbell, you've done a
Friesland's
couple
one that keeps
videos
appearing,
on the
yeah.
Oralinda book that is specifically the culture of Friesland, right? Like that's what it's
yeah. And they say it went under 4,000 years ago, I think.
Right. And the Netherlands, you know, that's the whole thing, is like a little boy stuck his finger in the, we can't say this on the internet,
Yeah,
but in order to
dog.
save,
That's a bit rude. God,
in order
can't do
to
that
save the country, he had to do it. But you know, it's the idea that it's mostly underlands. The Netherlands are the underlands. It's like Hades, like, is named after this. Tartarus was another name, and it was a place that the Spanish conquered and were like freaked out about. And they have their whole. We talked about this before, but Schwartz heat.
Schwartz.
All right, Schwartz heat. There he is. It's like blackface. So basically, this is Schwartpite. Pete, West Frisian, also known in English by the translated name Black Pete, a companion of Saint Nicholas. This is in The Office, American TV show, apparently. In the folklore of but also in the history books. It's a Spanish black Moor that travels around Christmas time. Has these little candies and stuff. It's like a historic precedent going back a long time.
Really?
So, yeah. They don't even know what to do about it, because it's like their whole legacy, you know, is that at one point Holland was part of Spain, was part of the Cordoba Caliphate, was part of the Moorish Empire, was run by Schwartz Pete. And if they take that out of their history books, well, I guess it doesn't matter anymore. But for a while, people cared, you know. But yeah, so then they have a bunch of people that literally do blackface, and this puts a whole nother light on Justin Trudeau. Like, maybe he was just being really sensitive to the Frisians. We don't realize.
Well, that sounds like Justin.
It looks like Justin. I don't even know what to say. God.
So super sensitive. So I was reading an article actually in, I think, like Science Today or some science journal online, that they just reconstructed a bunch of DNA from some mud pit or frozen mud outside of Greenland, and that shows 30 to 40,000 years ago it was an extremely tropical place full of all sorts of life, including or subtropical, not tropical, but subtropical, full of forests, fauna, animals, all sorts of stuff. Yeah. And that clearly it wasn't covered by a mile of ice as they're claiming it was. And this was the time of the megafauna of these mammoths, the mastodons, the giant sloths, the giant beavers. Everything was much larger, and it seems the whole world was warmer. So why weren't humans or hominids just as giant? And the fact is they most likely were.
That did come up also, talking about the vapor canopy a bit, just the idea of Florida and this humidity, and the idea of how much humidity there was at a certain point and what that meant for life and how big life could get. And you can see like the tribes in Florida were like 7 feet tall, right? What was the, I think I got a picture of a guy somewhere here. Oh, that was another thing, was the Gulf of Mexico and the Olmecs and the connection of the Arabic states and where they get this crescent moon. The idea that that Gulf is the Fertile Crescent. Right. And this is the Knights of the Golden Circle. They wanted to make this entire area the new Atlantis at the capital of Havana, which is the natural coastal port besides the rich port, Puerto Rico. So from Havana to Greenland, not that difficult. And then the connection, of course, to Labrador, right? Labrador and Labradorite and all the stones and the dogs. But that's not how you spell it. How do I spell this again? Labrador?
Labradore.
It just doesn't want me to get away with it. But look at that flag, right? I mean, come on. What is the deal? Like, look at this. It's like 2 runes, and then also the white, green, and blue. Very, very interesting place, Labrador. And if you look again on the map, let's see if I can just the map. The connection, of course, of being able to go from Greenland down the coast. Let me see if I can find a better example. I'll just go to the maps themselves. But the idea of just going along the coast, right? From here to Labrador. Look at this. It's nothing, you know? So you go from here, 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 and you go along the coast. And at this point, all of this is open water. You've got the Beaver Bay. Is that what James Bay, right? This is Beaver Bay at one. Hudson Bay is Beaver Bay at one.
Hudson
right?
Bay.
Yeah.
But beavers, Andreas.
It's true though. They're everywhere. And then that meant that the
They're
water
everywhere.
paths were way bigger. And this meant that you could go from here. I have a better map. Here's the drainage of the Mississippi. Okay. So if you could go from Labrador to here, then you could get anywhere. And that was a big deal.
Right.
Also that California was open at this point and there was a water path.
Do you think the whole beaver thing was because of hunting or because of like a reset event? Because you clearly,
I mean, it sure does help to get
more water.
It sure does help to get rid of beavers. If you want to desertify a place, you need beavers.
You just get rid of the beavers.
You got to get rid of the beavers. If you get them out of the place, then there's no way for the water to collect. And the feedback loops are crazy. It's such an important thing.
We need to import beavers to Australia, man.
You guys already have awesome stuff, though, right? I mean, don't you guys already have the equivalent to a giant beaver already? Or do they not do anything
We've
useful?
got a wombat. But wombats aren't really water animals.
That's
we
actually
haven't
a really good point, Campbell. Like if Australia had beavers, it'd take a while, but essentially they would turn the deserts into swamps or ponds and water.
Yeah, I don't think we've got any.
Get this. Apparently there were, and they're the giant castroid beavers in Australia, and in apparently, right? I just read that somewhere. I just saw this.
So they used to be here.
Yeah, and then Sri Lanka.
Were they marsupials, or were they mammals?
This is a good question.
Right, that's a very good question.
Wiki that. Giant beaver, castroid. Oh, but there's a whole other thing that looks like them. Hold on. Okay, so they're Mammalia rodentia. So they're a little off, right? Isn't mammalia to
a mammal
marsupial,
rodent, basically.
Marsupial is adjacent to rodentia.
So no, marsupials break off before mammal, isn't it? I think it's pre-mammal.
No, it goes from mammalia.
They're a type of mammal.
Mammalia,
marsupials they give birth to eggs. Well, no, that's
yeah, you're right. Like
to like pupas, like not proper babies.
Yeah, you're right.
I have like KW with their DNA.
The whole pouch thing, yeah.
Are these?
And then that's a monochrome, yeah.
Are platypods decent? Are they decent folk? Do they help at all with the? Do they do anything useful?
Well, I think they're more just foragers. They've just got soft beaks and they kind of but they don't like, what's the word? Change the landscape, basically. They're fairly benign. They look cool. And they're poisonous, man. They got poisonous dust behind their back legs.
That's pretty impressive. Yeah, they don't ever tell you about that. They tell us that they thought it was a joke when they first saw it, but the other thing is weasels, right? So beavers is that right? I think beavers are kind of weasel.
Like ferrets, they're like weasels as well, aren't they?
Ooh, beaver weasel in the Urban Dictionary was not the way to go. I'm sorry about that. Moving right along.
I think you're right on that.
What is it with certain animals?
I mean, but yeah, if these kinds of animals were removed and then that causes desertification, I'm not too surprised. And just the idea that this happens super quickly and that we don't realize that. So some of these things are environmental effects. Some of these things are ecological feedback loops that we've caused. And yeah, it's very interesting when you look at Greenland because clearly there's all these stories of underground military bases as well. And the idea that there's solidity there, so that you could build really solid structures of underground. It's not like the Etch-a-Sketch that California is.
Yeah, bloody Greenland. I don't know what's going on with that.
Supposedly it's
hyperborea?
expanding. I don't know.
Surface melting. Really?
It could be good.
So, because this is the thing about all this ice, like how old, Graham Hancock is come out at the moment on Netflix, obviously, and he's he's strangely annoying a lot of people for info that's about 30 years old.
Yeah, actually, I got to give it to him because every time I'm like, man, you got to go further. Then I'm like, oh wait, like as little as you went, people are calling you a white supremacist because you showed them the
Exactly
temple
right.
in
He's getting
Indonesia.
jealous.
What are you doing?
How dare
Yeah,
you.
I don't know. Racist ideologies to rewrite Indo-Pacific history. Yeah.
Sorry about that, guys.
No, it's all right.
No, you're right, Ben.
Oh, good. Glad to have you back.
So,
If you're
what
just
are your
tuning in,
thoughts
yeah.
What are your thoughts on the Ice Age and the sort of 11,000 years and the Graham Hancock talking about it? And then we have all these maps, showing us an iceless north and south. And we have, all these, what do you think? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, the whole world was tropical.
What do you reckon, 400
think
years ago?
Time frames are kind of interesting. I think there's been 3 or 4 polarity flips, and each one was a little different. I think not too long ago, the world was populated with giant trees. Everyone here is familiar with that concept. And just like in a modern day rainforest of today, the tree creates the trees create a canopy.
The canopy which holds in moisture.
And the vapor canopy hypothesis has been around. And I hate using the word hypothesis because there's quite a few well-written books from the late 1800s, early 1900s about the vapor canopy, showing it was more of a fact. And I think it was very much related to the giant trees.
Yeah.
And just like animals and people of today, the trees create that vapor canopy. So I think the vapor canopy was related to the giant trees. And similar to the idea that pyramids were built to house people to survive not just a flood, but perhaps a polarity shift, that trees used to be how we survived them. Still to this day, especially in Florida, shout out Old World, Florida. Cypress trees are hollow. About a third of the tree is hollow. And when they have a hurricane and big flooding, all the animals go inside the tree to survive the hurricanes and the floods.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I think just like in the rainforest in the Amazon today, 80% of all life in the Amazon lives in, on, or around the trees. And just like the movie Avatar, I've said on Old World Florida with Longo that I think that movie was about as real of a past Earth experience as we've had, and that we were living in and amongst the trees. And, we were giants, 20, 30, 40 feet tall, but these trees were, 4, 5, 6, 10 miles tall. Some maybe larger. And when these cyclical weather events would happen, we would just go inside the tree and it would protect us, just like the animals do today. And
major part of George Lucas's story, of course, of the Wookiees. They are the wild men from the Renaissance paintings, right? We've shown the wild men Renaissance paintings where they're covered in fur, right? They're tall giants that are covered in fur. If you haven't figured out, Chewbacca is what he is. And then he lives on Kashyyyk, which I can't spell. Oh, it's got 3 Y's. Sorry about that. Kashyyyk is a giant redwood planet with vapor canopy where everyone lives in the trees. It's kind of like the Ewok village, but way bigger.
Mm-hmm.
And that gets destroyed by the Empire. And this is, because George Lucas is originally Star Walker was a Mayan astrology symbol as well.
Maybe do you want to show some of like what is it, Hell's Peak or no, the stumps of like what the big trees would be, like the remnants of them.
Yeah, you can, I'm sharing my screen if you want to.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's let.
So here's an old drawing of Cairo.
Devil's Tower, Bernie.
There we go.
And
Oh,
this
like a
is
tarot card. All right.
This is a pretty great representation of what I was just saying here.
That's crazy. I haven't even noticed that yet. Oh my gosh, I feel it.
And this could just as easily be Cairo.
Right click it and open it as another tab. It'll.
Yeah, but it's so glitchy.
Yeah.
Using it on a computer. I'm trying to control.
There you go.
It's hard to see, but if you look on the right side here, this is a a drawing of Cairo from the 1500s. And if you look at on the right side here, this would be the quote unquote Giza Plateau. And you can see all the pyramids are built on top of what look like old tree stumps.
Oh.
And this is like I think they built pyramids on top of tree stumps.
Wow. Okay.
That's fascinating.
Graham Hancock has talked about how the Giza Plateau is so laser perfectly flat that it would take some kind of device cutting it down. But that's the same thing you see with these mesas all over the world.
Here, I got a larger version of that picture. Let me just pull it up for a second because it's kind of interesting. If you get down to that, so obviously if you zoom out, you can see that's the map. But if you get down to the right, you can see what's going on those mesas. Well, you got a wall there, and then you've got pyramids being built right on top of the cut mesas, and they're all in a row like tree stumps from a forest. And then there's all this going on.
Yeah, and the statue head too, I think, is reminiscent of, someone in the stump. If you go down, you'll see the statue head on top of the tree stump at the bottom, right?
Oh yeah, wow. Okay.
So it's kind of symbolizing to me that the rest of his body is in the tree, kind of like the people are below in the tree.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, look at that. That totally looks like on the giant tree stumps.
Yeah. And like I was saying, that the animals retreat into the trees during storms and floods.
Retreat. That's very nice, isn't it?
And this is one of my long threads about that I hypothesized Noah built the pyramids on top of ancient tree stumps.
Starmade Productions. Yes, this is live. Thank you for asking.
Before they were all chopped down. This is an article from the 1880s. This author is talking about that the Great Pyramids are the real Noah's Ark and that they were all structures designed as entrances and exits for underground labyrinths that people lived in during the floods.
Of course.
And he provides a lot of really good evidence about all the pyramids on the plateaus have salt up to a certain level. And I'll show you another. So yeah, I have tons of, endless pyramids.
This is really fascinating because we were talking about Krakatoa and the lighthouse and surviving in a tower that might have been maybe an ancient tower now. At the time I thought it was like a silly story that he could live in a tower covered by a tsunami, but that's kind of what all these reset stories are about.
Yeah. And when you think of like magic, and a sorcerer would use a tree, just like an antenna. And I think the Tower of Babel was a tree.
Or built on it, at least. Look at that. Right?
Yeah. So this is a picture from a railroad map in 1844. So 1844. And this is a pyramid in a lake.
By the way, they removed the pyramid from Pyramid Lake. If you go there now, you won't find the pyramid, but you will find yourself about 10 minutes or 20 from Burning Man. And people go swimming in Pyramid Lake say that you can go through a portal and end up on the other side of Tahoe and a few other lakes.
So here's what's fascinating. This is actually not Pyramid Lake.
Oh, really?
Really, yeah. I dug into this and I actually found it. Here it is right here. This is in Pyramid Lake, Nevada.
Oh.
So Nevada was a territory. It didn't exist in 1844. So Upper California became Nevada. So here it is.
Can you
And
go click on that?
it's been absolutely melted.
Wow.
Um,
That is insane.
I've seen that one before, right? Like that pyramid in Nevada.
correct.
And I believe there's a Sphinx close by it too.
There's all kinds of crazy stuff here at this lake. And when they were first exploring it in the late 1840s, they talked about how the whole area was surrounded. It looked like a giant city, and there was what looked like cement on all these different structures. Hopefully I can find... I have another great article about this that describes or reaffirms what I was saying about the pyramids being survival. So here's the original map that has the excerpt here on the right hand side, the pyramid. I'm not seeing it, but it talks about how there was a giant inland sea, and this pyramid would have been the very center of that inland sea, with 100 feet of it sticking out. So if you study the Benben stone, it basically is the capstone of a pyramid, and it's a lodestone. And so the Benben stone, again, you have the reset symbology. You have Noah's Ark, right? Ark of the Covenant, magnetism, reset. And you have the people going below ground to survive a cataclysm. Kind of sums it all up. So you have this
and
lake.
a changing water level too. I mean, look at the height of this where they're standing and the mountains behind it compared to the photo you have, and you can see the water level change too.
Exactly. Not only that, you can see how well this was still very much. You could see the stones,
right?
The individual bricks, and there was another event since that picture was taken.
Like a Napoleonic shooting at the Sphinx Mormon invasion, or was that okay?
Something along those lines. I think it would be comet related.
Interesting.
But yeah. So yeah, this area is hugely military, deep underground bases. So this, just like there were articles in the 1800s about miles and miles and miles and miles of tunnels under the Giza Plateau. So if we're thinking, like I was saying and suggesting, when trees petrify, the channels, the veins, which is where we get modern mining, because mining today is biogeology, as Stellium has done a fantastic job of showing, and I'm a huge supporter of that, just like in the movie Avatar.
And that dude, Chardin, who discovered the Homo giganticus, was into, right?
Right. And when human and living tissue petrifies, it turns into gold, silver, crystal. And so, and as I've postulated on Old World Florida's channel and shown fairly reasonable evidence, at the bottom of these giant trees were graves. And so it was customary to plant a tree on top of a grave. China has, in Japan, the pagoda. Pagodas are built on top of graves. I think they're symbolical, kind of representing the afterlife, the spirit becoming, a new living representation, as above, so below type of thing. But like in the movie Avatar, when the humans come mining, where is the mineral that they need to power their ships and their weapons? It's at the base of the tree. So giants, titans, when they die or be petrified, they become minerals, all kinds of different minerals. So they're mining titans. And petrified trees, petrified sap. When sap petrifies, it becomes many different minerals as well. So the modern mining industry of today is biogeological mining. It's not riverbed, all these different layers decomposing, becoming coal and all these things. That's not how it works. It's biogeology, and the language they use in mining reaffirms that. But yeah, get me back on topic.
Right. Well, it's a good point, though, of the mining and all the underground tunnels literally all over the world. Like all the different indigenous cultures have these verbal stories passed down and legends. Like, for instance, in the Grand Canyon, the Hopi of the underground cities to survive the catastrophe of the Ant people, which is right close to Nevada there and that lake and all the military bases. And then Michael Tellinger's work from South Africa and all of the old mining shafts and tunnels and whatnot throughout that area. And like you said, in Egypt, there's rumors and legends and stories that keep popping up of the underground city tunnels throughout there. And it just seems to be everywhere. It's like we're in this Futurama world of past cultures below us, just levels upon levels upon levels.
So yeah, are you about to tell me that Eden is not in Missouri, but Nevada? What's going on?
Yeah, I mean, there are many Edens, in my opinion. But yeah, this is a great article. It talks about a cave system, the Lehman Cave, where they found Egyptian hieroglyphics,
Right.
giant skeletons, the story of Adam and Eve pictorially written in the cave. Very interesting. And here's the article. People have seen the images of how they were hydraulically mining California in, the gold rush, late 1840s, 1850s. This is from, even though it says Nevada, it's California, Cardiff. They found giants. They were petrified into silver and gold and all these different elements. And they found with the giants bones of yet huger animals on which they used to ride, judging from the saddles as large as dump carts found still strapped on their backs.
Wow.
So they're finding 20, 30-foot giants. I have petrified horses that are 50 feet tall in California. So you can only imagine what kind of things they're finding. But this is a great article because it covers a lot of what I just said. It talks about that the giants were petrified into different quartz crystals and ores, that they were much larger than the 8-foot giants we're so used to reading about, and animals that were saddled. So we got giants riding giant horses.
And hopefully some giant sloth, because that would be just...
Oh, I got giant sloths.
Thank you, bro.
Have you seen that one? Didn't I share it with you?
I hope so. If not,
I don't think I
do
did.
it again
You'll
anyway.
love it. Here.
Yeah. Regardless.
Patagonian Indians trap giant sloth in a cave, fence it in, feed it grass, and milk it.
Big deal that they're talking. It's just because it's an ancient extinct animal, right? Like, what? Wait, what? Okay, hold on.
I'll just read this one. And again, not too far away to the south lies the former Republic of Patagonia, divided now between Chile and Argentina. The Patagonians, wild, powerfully built Indians, had succeeded in domesticating the giant sloth, the Mylodon,
There we go.
whose amiable disposition and gigantic bulk had made it possible for the prehistoric natives to fence this huge mammal in a cave where they fed it with cut grass and milked it, perhaps a barrel or more at a milking. So yeah, it's funny you brought that up.
And then the Europeans, this was one of the stupidest animals ever. The next paragraph, right?
Mm-hmm.
Gosh. Riding giant beavers. That sounds way worse. Paradox fossils. Come on. But yeah, I mean, the idea that there's these ancient giant creatures that were beyond, because we think of horses and we think of elephants and things, but there's a lot of weird looking things. I mean, Cambell, Australia, like there's a lot of weird looking animals all over the place. And I think this comes up when people say, well, that doesn't look exactly like an elephant or a horse or something like that. Well, yeah, it might have been their equivalent creature, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. And, if you can keep your mind open enough, things like this just reinforce, Stellium's giant elephant.
Right.
And understanding that in the vapor canopy and, density changes, oxygen levels would create creatures far larger. It's not a myth. I have skeletal remains found in the Gobi Desert, 900 feet long, so Again, that's not as large as Stellium's elephant, but it goes to show you these things were public knowledge. Sea serpents that were 500 feet long, many, 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 many of these. I got one right here that I brought up, I think. Yeah. Pulse of
Right,
Western
like-
Progress.
Yes.
120-foot long dragon found in Utah. Circular hole descended 80 feet past underground cavern. Grandest sight ever beheld by man. Petrified reptile, perfect in every detail, 18-inch curved fangs. Only perfect specimen of a dragon in existence. And that's in Utah.
And now they just sweep it all under the category of dinosaurs, and that anything giant must have just been from the dinosaur time, and that it was a dinosaur, and that clearly the environment was substantially different at that time for all of this megafauna to exist, and that if there was hominids or intelligent beings habitating the realm at that time, they also would have been giant.
Well, just a good quick reminder, if you could pull on my page for a second, is just that if you go to Wikipedia on birds, right, and you type in like dinosaur, you'll find birds are feathered theropod dinosaurs and constitute the only known living dinosaurs. So let's just remember what rebranding is and how this guy became a penguin and was once thought of as actually the dinosaur bird, the Arctic dinosaur. You know, and realistically, that's what scientists are still thinking. So our whole
That's a
pterosaur,
brontosaurus, isn't it?
right? Think about it.
It's clearly
Basically,
a brontosaurus.
we have a lot of questions to ask about giant birds flying around, leaving their nests in New Zealand. You know,
So-
what's up?
What about the whole fact that there's all the flightless birds are in the southern ring,
Right.
not in the northern?
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. It's like almost like because the flightless migrations that all lead to the North Pole, and the birds are following
yeah,
magnetism.
yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, they were talking about
That's how desperate they were to
So-
follow the magnet that they had to grow wings. That's interesting.
They had to grow wings, man. Yeah,
Get there.
well,
they had Red Bull on them, luckily.
this goes back to what we were talking about with the storks and the symbology of the stork. And
Because there's a
Andreas-
whole thing about the stork war, isn't there? The stork fighting the
Pygmies.
pygmies.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was in the northern latitudes. One of the islands of Hyperborea was labeled the land of pygmies.
Pygmy.
Yeah. And that the storks would come out at different times of the year, specific times. And
Pics and pictograms. The idea that the pics were pygmies is a thing.
100%.
So
Yeah.
were they picking up pygmies and dropping them off? And we're going, look at these little people. They're babies.
I mean, that's not far off possible.
Yeah.
No, it's
The other
true.
way is that they were the indigenous,
Really?
humans of
Wow.
those areas or something, and that they
Well,
were replaced,
Because
eaten.
this is the thing about like the giants, the taller humans. Like it looks like in the sort of 1700s that most humans were sort of 9, 10, even 12 footers. Like, do you think that the genetic engineering or the reintroduction of babies was to shrink us down? Do you think that was done on purpose, or do you think we're actually pygmies, or what do you think? You got any thoughts on that?
It would seem the most likely to me that the smaller races are the ones that lived underground.
Okay.
The largest underground, because I've found tons of caves that weren't just caves, they were man-made. And, some of them were sepulchers for giants, but they were never bigger than 8 feet. I think the big giants lived on the surface. And the repopulated race, it would make the most sense, would be the humans that we're used to today. And that the giants that still walk among us today that are predominantly Hyperborean or melanin races that still preserve some of that giant gene would be the quote unquote leftovers or the
6 foot pygmy would be a good band name. I'm into it.
The interbreeding, right?
6 foot pygmy.
The gods could be the ones that dwelled on the surface, and
Well,
people as we know us today, the biblical quote unquote sons of Noah would be us. I don't
From
necessarily
underground?
totally agree with. I think that's just a creative reset story, and it also I think is astrological. You know, there weren't 4 seasons, there
Okay.
were 3 seasons.
Right. All the Egyptian calendars.
Yeah,
Clear.
and autumn is summer. So there was no autumn. It was just winter, spring, and summer. And
Yeah, flood season. They called one of them, right?
yeah, and exactly. Yep. And the Noah and was Janus. Janus is the lodestone.
2 of every
Magnetism.
kind.
Correct. Yep. Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, and you know, feminine, masculine, positive, negative. The lodestone created a living representation of itself, and reproduction is a perfect example of that. And that it always goes back to magnetism, dielectricity. That's the root of it all, and that's why all religions worship the lodestone, the magnetic stone, the monad, Janus. Yeah.
So is this the stone of Scone? Is that a lodestone?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Jacob's ladder
Right.
is an oceanic pathway for lodestones.
He dreams at the base of these angels ascending and descending upon a.
Exactly. Yeah, and the I can't remember the name of the chair, but there's a throne.
Right. In Britain, the Scottish throne.
And it came from exactly. And that there was this throne, the throne of Britain, came from Scotland, and that this is the same thing with the sword and the stone. The chair. So when they were doing all these tests on lodestones, the first articles I can find on them come from like the 1840s, 1830s. There's some in the late 1700s, but I can't really trace them. They're hooking batteries up to them, and they're doing all kinds of crazy experiments with the lodestones. But anyways, this sacred throne, the story goes that people would sit on the chair and the stone would hiss and squeal, and they would know that that person wasn't fit to be king. So when they'd finally get a person that could sit on top of the lodestone and it would be silent, that's who would be king. It's the same story with the sword and the stone. When they found the person who could remove the sword from the lodestone. So it's a magnetism thing.
Right, and the stone sometimes is an anvil just to make it like punch the point home for people.
Right.
The anvil and the stone.
Yeah, you can. I mean, Mecca. It's Greek, and it means to whirl. So you look at the Muslims of today make their pilgrimage to Mecca, and they circle the lodestone.
Being an automaton in the old days didn't mean to be a robot. It meant to be kind of like in Islam,
hypnotized.
Yeah, but also to be like in harmony with like God's will. The way, kind of true. Hypnotized is a word for
hypnotized. Well, magnetism, mesmerism, and hypnotism are all the same thing.
Oh, mesmer.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And when you study language far enough, and Andreas has heard me talk about this a lot, but I haven't talked about this on a public forum very much. But Julian Jaynes wrote probably one of the most incredible books there is today, and it's about the bicameral mind. And he hypothesized that before there were 2 hemispheres of the brain, there was one united hemisphere, and that everyone was living in a kind of unity consciousness, and that they were all speaking God's will, kind of like Andreas just said. So you weren't without the 2 hemispheres of the mind where you can remove yourself essentially consciously from the wholeness that we are all involved in, because really we're all one thing. That consciousness, or the bicameral hemispheres of the brain, created the potentiality for us to be conscious beings. And that he hypothesized that only 1,000 years ago there wasn't this conscious.
It was much so rare.
Correct. It was very rare.
Perhaps and if you had this feeling happen to you, you would feel like God is speaking through you.
Exactly. Yeah. And he, that you can tie this into a lot of the early Arabic writers said that the poets were the true gods, which is interesting because when you study language and poetry and all these things, it becomes very interesting. Where did language really come from, and how does it? Because language only exists in one hemisphere, whereas almost all of human existence, as we know it, exists in both hemispheres. So you have redundancy, right? You have an accident, you have motor skills in both. You can have some kind of trauma to your left brain, a stroke, and you can still regain motor function. But language exists only in the left brain.
Right.
So it's very interesting.
Interesting experiments with that, haven't they? With language and cognition, where people have like lost, hemispheres and things.
Well, also the wolf child is the gnarliest one to me. And I know we've talked about this before, Analog, but it's the girl in San Diego, and there's the French story as well.
Mhm.
There's a number of these stories of kids raised by wolves. The Soviet Union,
Fantastic.
you have kids, and they did MRIs finally. I mean, back in the 19th century, you just had a French boy in the woods. It's a little harder, but today, with the Soviet Union abandoning kids and with kids locked in their homes in San Diego doing the MRIs, we could see what changes happen to the human brain. And it's very interesting because it's almost as if without that part of your brain, without it being trained, it doesn't grow and just wilts like a flower that's potentially there to make these connections. You have all these blank neurons waiting to make connections. But if they don't happen, they're gone. And so it's as if we're wet wire programmed with this logic algorithmic operating system that's been put into us, and we teach it self-replicate that operating system, but that it's not part of humanity. That is a separate thing, an entity that's
not nature,
right?
Yeah. It's magnetism again, because shout out Paul, Black Sheep researcher, What the Flock TV, good friend of mine.
Black Sheep.
We've been bouncing our Janus material off each other for quite a while now. And his ether work, right? Ether is the fifth element. The true alchemical work involves words and, speech and spelling, grammar.
Angular sounds, I think, is
grammar. Yeah. Grammar and grimoires. And, the English, the angelic language. When you speak your words, you're creating, and this is the whole concept of the wizard. And in an older age, when the ether was probably much more energetically charged, you could literally create things in front of you just by speech. And this has kind of fallen into the occultic, dark arts, black magic realms of today. But yeah.
But it's starting to come back. It's starting to come back into mainstream subconsciousness or mainstream consciousness with virtual reality, augmented reality, the metaverse. They're trying to make it a psychological.
Well, that's the false creation. Yeah. So, do you think that kind of stuff's going to come back? Like, do you?
Yeah, because eventually people raised inside the matrix. People raised inside the matrix are eventually going to have so for now, we're like, oh, there's a difference between reality and the internet. But kids raised tomorrow who aren't allowed outside aren't going to know that. They're going to understand that world, and they're going to function inside of it. And eventually I think it'll just transform everything into magic again. Yeah,
I did a breakdown on the Matrix quite a while ago, but this ties in with that, right? The Janus symbology is incredibly rich in the Matrix. His room is 101, which is the number of Janus 11, and he follows the white rabbit. And what happens when he wakes up, right? He unplugs, and the plug is in the back of his head, which this goes into the letter Q.
Right.
The letter Q is really interesting. It symbolizes the back of the head or the nape. Cough. Q is also the symbol of magnetism. It represents the compass. It also represents the egg and the sperm. Reproduction, positive and negative, the two ends of the magnet. And yeah, language and Janus go hand in hand. The two letters that represent Janus are AI. So Janus is the artificial intelligence, which is the lodestone. Remember, these things were deities. So perhaps in an age similar to what I was mentioning, where Julian James was talking about humans weren't conscious in the way that we know of them, I think that we were living, because children, until about the age of 7, their brains are actually functioning in theta, which is hypnotic. That's the hypnotic
I
vibration.
don't see the separation. Yeah.
Correct. And that he postulates that perhaps we couldn't get out of theta. And we were taking our orders essentially from these deities, these lodestones. And maybe through genetic manipulation, a change in the environment, we our hemispheres of the brain separated. And true consciousness, polarity, came into existence. And you can see that in everything. Everything's dualistic in this world. And the hardest thing for people to remember is that we're all from the same source, right? Returning to the source, which is, again, the monad, the symbol for Janus, and our realm, right? The symbol of Atlantis, the symbol of the flat earth, Mount Meru in the center, so on and so forth. But yeah, that's a rabbit hole. So
the original language was one of like full cymatics, where like you literally would be manifesting, I mean, not necessarily matter, but like shape and form, like energy through speech.
Yes.
Kind of
Or
like
is this pre-language, because language is that, part of the brain that's referencing.
Language is post the division of the brain.
Right. Lacan even agrees. I think we'll go with it.
That would be frequency, more like frequency. Like you could use sound to create.
It's interesting because Slavoj Zizek talks about the perversion of language. He's got like a pervert's guide to cinema and things like that. But what he means is that like we pervert reality into stories about it. And so if I were to share what happened today and literally just give you my memory of it, that would be very different than me telling you, oh man, I had a great day. And let me just set the scene for you. There was and I could tell you all these nice, like your midget walks into your bar is funnier than my midget walking into my bar. It's your midget. So we're constantly perverting our ideas of existentialism through language. If we got rid of language completely, which is kind of what Elon Musk is talking about with Neuralink, right? Let me just send you. He even talked about sharing sexual experiences, right? That you would Neuralink if you're an exhibitionist, you could share your experience and someone else could experience it. Again, very different than reading a smutty poem or magazine, like to actually be in the scenario with the sensorial information.
Yeah. Yeah. And they talk about, these people, they're quote unquote gifted, and they can kind of pick up on energy of other people, or they can touch people and get their memories, or they get an organ donated through some kind of surgery, and they develop these ghost limbs, ghost memories.
Izzy video talking about the cymatic speech in the recital of the Quran. I hope you've seen some of the David Ewing Jr. talks we've done on Islam in Arabic, because it is very fascinating and how ancient it is and transcendent.
He's one of my favorite authors. So shout out Andreas and his David videos. They are some of my favorite. I've watched them countless times. He has been saying what I've been saying to you for so long, Andreas.
Word.
That when you trace languages back, you'll keep falling on Arabic.
True. And whatever it was that Arabic, because they want to call it a Proto-Arabic language. So that's another interesting thing looking at, because Sanskrit's so much newer than we think it is, and Tamil is so much more connected to Finnish than we thought it was. Mm-hmm. All these things are starting to really pull together. So again, Dr. Longo from Old World, Florida, talking about the wellspring of language, which is Welsh. Mm-hmm. Right. And Welsh is just so crazy. The more you dig into it and find Turkish and Arabic.
Exactly. Yeah. The Arabic roots are really interesting. And I was led down that rabbit hole first through the money with Burke.
Always follow the money, but really, if you're.
Yeah. And I was finding Arabic dominant currency where currency had just started. So there was no currency.
Germany loves a lot. Allemans, right? That's what that is, right?
Russia, Gotland. Me and Longo talked about this on one of his shows, but Gotland is an incredible place. It's constructed in the middle of the Baltic. The Gulf Stream connects to it. So if the world was in an ice age or a mini ice age, you would have a direct unfrozen stream that would lead you from Gotland to Florida.
Right.
But Gotland is a what I would hypothesize to be a completely terraformed man-made island. It's made of Kachina shell concrete, just like what a lot of the stuff he's been pointing out. And it has, still to this day, the largest collection of Arabic coins ever found. And this is dozens of these articles where they find one, and then the next find is even bigger. They're like, holy shit, this is even bigger than the one we found in 1850. Then they find another one. The biggest one ever was just like 2011. They found it the biggest they'd ever found on the island. And all of these succeeding discoveries are bigger than anywhere in the world. And come to find out, the foundations of Admiralty law have their roots on Gotland.
Really?
Yeah. So
I did not know that. Go
Yeah.
elaborate. That's crazy.
well,
I mean,
that's-
because we were
that's
looking
one
into
of
the
my-
Balkans. The Balkans have a pyramid, and it's interesting you pull up, talking again about Old World Florida, because we were looking at the Barbary Wars, and you look at how the Barbary Wars immediately end. They go into finding all these Bedouin princes who were considered scoundrels all across the area of the Mexican Gulf, right? This Gulf Spring that is possible to get anywhere in the world from.
And what's really also interesting is that after I published this article about Gotland, Victor reached out to me and told me that Gotland was completely closed off to the public until like 2000.
Really?
And in this article, this is from 1872. I'll just read the whole thing. Gotland is the largest island in the southern part of the Baltic, being 80 miles long and 33 miles wide. It is a limestone formation, and the rocks are full of fossils and petrifactions. A considerable business is done at Wisby in making columns for churches and marble tabletops, brooches, and other ornaments of the choice specimens of the stone and coral formations. Here, nearly 500 years before America was discovered, was a mart of commerce and a seat of wealth unrivaled by any other seaport in northern Europe. Across the plains of Tartary and up the rivers over the steeps of what is now Russia came the caravans of merchants with their costly goods, which were shipped in multitudes of vessels to Gotland. This lovely island, why were they shipped to Gotland? Because Gotland was the bridge to America. This lovely island in the Baltic began to attract people from all nations. The Arabians brought their precious stores, and their silver became the currency of the country. Their silver, not their gold. That's an important connection. The choicest collection of Arabic coins in existence is probably that in the Museum of Antiquities at Stockholm, and this was chiefly gathered from the island of Gotland. Wisby became the emporium of the West, and during the 14th and 15th centuries, it was the principal factory of Hanseatic League. And it keeps going. The whole island of Gotland is of interest. In a drive of 36 miles, we visited a dozen ancient churches and left more than 80 unseen. Many of these have been restored and have been thoroughly whitewashed. Very important. Restored and whitewashed. Thus covering up their former elegant carvings, tracery, and being supplied with hideous paintings and wooden images of Christ and the Virgin Mary. So these weren't
Hideous,
Christian.
huh?
These weren't Christian churches. Okay, in this tiny little island, there are over 100 churches, and none of them are Christian. Arabic coins, right? The people are religious, and these restored churches are thronged by the simple peasants, and some of whom are doubtless the descendants of those cultivated and wealthy merchants who filled the island with luxury, and the arts which wait on wealth 7 centuries ago, but I must stop. If you have overrun Europe and long for something fresh. Anyways, it goes on to talk about that it was the seat of admiralty law. So this article continues, and so I don't have to read the whole thing, but at the bottom of here it says the Maritime Code of Wisby commanded implicit obedience from the ports of Russia to the Mediterranean. So this little island controlled everything. And it was the groundwork of the admiralty law of the world today. So this article is from 1870.
That is very interesting.
1872.
Are you familiar with Candia, the siege of Candia?
No. Fill me in.
So there's a sister city to Gotland, actually. And the siege of Candia, it's about the kingdom of Candia. In case you needed a fun little look at that, right? There's their sigil, their flag, right?
Yep.
But the siege of Candia goes a little deep. Look at this, right? Look at this guy with swinging a baseball, right? I think is what's going on there. That must be what's happening. So, but the siege of Candia. So basically, this was the south version. And I did a Google map because I thought it'd be funny. Like, how would you get from Gotland? Well, you could go straight across. But there's also like literally a river path. So if you just took the boat, you can go straight to Greece. So this is a pretty good thing if you happen to have a Viking boat, they can deal with that kind of whatever. But the kingdom of Candia which is in modern day Heraclean Crete, a military conflict where the Ottoman forges besieged a Venetian ruled city until eventually they won. Really, and then they just because they could and even the Vatican was like, we can't really win this. It's like 21 years, I guess, is going on for it, and maybe there's a conflict before it, and so finally they just let them have it. They're like, okay, fine, we can't do anything about it. But then in exchange, they allowed for Dubrovnik and parts of the Roman coast to be seceded back to the Vatican. Like, all right, well, you guys can have that area. Like, let us just have Gotland and Candia. And we can do whatever we want with these. And martial law was a major part of this because you have the Janissaries who were drafted, conscripted in exchange for their families being protected. You didn't pay taxes. You just gave your kids, and a couple of your kids would join. So they had tons of Christians that were, or whatever, that maybe they're pagans, like they're local Tartars, and they're working for the Hungarians. They're working in Berlin, they're working in Vienna, but they're also working in Gotland and they're working in Candia in order to keep this going. And they have family on either side in order to communicate with merchants from the other city. So you send it to your cousin, and your cousin is a specialist there. So kind of interesting. Like it's the sister city is the Candia, which had the siege of Candia.
Very interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think that what I was talking about with Gotland, that's kind of originally in the ballpark of what made me reach out to Longo, because it just was coincidental that I was crossing a bunch of my T's with the Gulf of Mexico. I've been talking about, I've been talking about Mexico and Tenochtitlan for 5 years and what they really symbolized. But yeah, making the connection with the Gulf Stream and resets and ice ages and all these things, and how these ice ages are actually far closer to our actual time frame than we're led to believe. And the dinosaur thing connects with that. And, these millions of years time frame things are ridiculous. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think the age of giant trees and the vapor canopy was maybe 1 or 2 electromagnetic flips away. And that's where we're at today. But yeah, the Arabic, which is what you brought up with your David Ewing, his stuff is fantastic. He basically just sounds off exactly what I've been hypothesizing, but with really fascinating. And I've been obsessed with the number 19 for that's been my handle for 12 years now.
Right.
And just hearing him say, that last, what was it, 2 episodes ago you did with him where he was just rounding off all the 19s?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty funny because I was like, all right, we got to get out of our system because we got to process 19 so we can get to the 23 Enigma, but we're almost there. But then the thing is June 19th and everything, Juneteenth and everything. So there's a lot. I was just going to show this map really quickly to just corroborate what you're trying to say here. Looking at the Persian Gulf, the Gulf Stream, and the Gulf Stream going into Spain. At one point, of course, this was the area where you could launch off from as well. So if you went from, the Egyptian or Tripoli side of Phoenicia, you would come through south of Spain, through the port city of Alamarca, I think it's called. And then you would get from Granada, and you could get in the same Gulf Stream, which you could have to go north in order to do it. So it's like there's a road. If you try to do it from here, you're going to go south. So you have to get up north in order to go follow this way, unless you want to go down here to
the
go.
Silk Road is not overland. That's a bunch of nonsense.
There's no way. I mean, they travel so fast this way, obviously.
Sorry to interrupt, but one part that I really wanted to cover there, Ben, tonight before we end is, do you mind going over some of the giant walls in North America that you had some articles
The Moors of America? Yeah, do that.
Sure. Yeah.
All right.
I'm still sharing. Okay, perfect. Can you see my screen? Perfect.
Yep.
Okay, so there are several. There are walls that extend from Peru all the way through Mexico, through Texas, they're all one long continuous wall, just like the Great Wall of China. And I was going to start with the Great Wall of Texas, but let's go down here and let's do my Great Wall of Mississippi first. So yeah, Mississippi's Great Wall. So I apologize for some of my, they're photocopying really old newspapers and the quality isn't always the best. So
But My Great Wall, Mississippi, what a cool movie title, right? I'd watch it.
Yeah, and what's great is down here, I'll get there, but I'll just summarize it real quick, is they called this the Brandywine Wall. And if you study Tolkien, and there's been a lot of people that have hypothesized Middle Earth being America, and that Tolkien's map overlays very well with America. Well, funny enough, I did a little overlay on Old World Florida, and the Brandywine River is right next to Mississippi on the overlay. So I think Tolkien is talking about this exact wall.
Middle America, Mesoamerica. Okay.
Yeah. And, I've talked about Kublai Khan and the lands of Cathay, the Great White City being Chicago, and, that all being here in America. Anyways, I don't want to read the whole thing just because there's a bunch of rambling, but let's just jump in somewhere. I'll just start at the top. One of the scientific puzzles of the state of Mississippi is the Brandywine Stone Wall. It has long been a problem that is yet unsolved. Some time ago, Mr. Thomas of Hazelhurst sent Governor Longino a pencil drawing of an immense pile of stone in the northeastern portion of Claiborne County, suggesting that the stone might be utilized in building a new capital. So this is something really important, just to jump off for a second. A lot of these old world structures, they take apart and build new cities or new construction with them. And this isn't the first article. I have dozens where they talk about dismantling
Getting
ancient
some
things.
orphan foundling boys and saying, hey, here's a job. Why don't you guys pick this stuff up and do some civic work? Literally.
Yeah, take this apart. We're going to build a new capital.
You'll find photos of it at every state park. It's brutal.
In a letter which accompanied the drawing, Mr. Watson stated that these stones piled high on each other covered an area 4 miles square. So in another article, they find the continuation of this wall hundreds of miles up the Mississippi, hundreds of miles. And I think it connects with more of my articles that go not only into Mexico, but Texas, Peru, Bolivia, Guatemala, so on and so forth. I've hypothesized with 13th Monkey, who you had on, Cambell, good friend of mine. He's kind of on board, I think, with my idea that we were like the stories of Atlantis, and Edgar Cayce talks about the Atlanteans were at war not with each other, but with giant animals, Titan animals. And I think these walls were part of that construction. They weren't keeping out hordes of people, like we're told. They were keeping out huge beasts.
Attack on Titan kind of level. you
Oh,
know.
for sure. I mean, you watch some of these animes, the Godzilla shows, they kind of touch on these things.
Japan knows. Japan knows what's up.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Dude, the
man.
anime out of Japan, they got a lot of spot on stuff, in my opinion. Anyways, each stone is 6 feet long, 3 feet wide, 2 feet thick. So all the stones are identical. To act like this is that nature stacked this or it's some kind of geological development is nonsense, which is partially what some of the narratives that you find later down the road in the 1940s and 50s, what they were saying. The wall kept revealing itself. They dismantled that section and they would keep finding more of it and more of it. You know, there's only so many of these stories you can keep suppressed. And we'll get to that too when we get to the Great Wall in Texas. 2 feet thick, joined together with an excellent quality of cement. Okay, so this stone wall is buried 30, 40 feet underground. They're just finding the top of it. And they're
the
talking
cement
about
thing's good because lost cement, Roman recipe for cement, lost for 1,000, right? But here it is.
And I live in Portland, Oregon, where the famous Portland cement, which supposedly is worldwide. I mean, they have it in Australia, the same recipe. Right. It's everywhere. So it's just old world. They're repurposing, you know, just like we break down old technology.
What's the secret ingredient for you? I heard it's seashells, isn't it? It's seashells.
Usually. Yep.
Like there's got to be a drum roll there, right?
I thought you were going to say blood, but
oh well,
that was going to lead us down another
well,
rabbit
that's
hole.
not even that big of a secret. That's just Pepsi. They pour it in it. But you know, you were talking about the man-made island. Was it Gotland being a man-made island? Yeah. Yep. So the example of it being made of concrete with seashell is huge there again.
Yeah, just like Florida and just like the Yucatan. Both of them are man-made. That's my opinion, of course.
Shout out to major parts of the coastline. CRS, who just did a good video on that type of cement and the seashell cement or whatever. And as for the man-made islands and all of that, I've got an interview with Dutch Since coming up right away, where he's found just ridiculous amounts of evidence of everything being essentially intelligently designed or man-made or something. Something
13th Monkey, right? So Mike from 13th Monkey, his work for the last half a decade is all showing how they very strategically build and engineer a coastline around the Star Fort in order to keep that coastline there that way. Exactly. Because, you know, I mean, not just for sacred geometry, that's a huge part of it. I think that's why they pick where it stays. But at the end of the day, if you don't do that, then you've got your coastline changing season after season all the time, right? Mm-hmm. So
yeah, and
look right now. You live in you live in Portland. You've seen the cliffs and coasts, right? There's all these things. They have these metal bars and concrete and stuff to reinforce the coastline right now. Otherwise, we'd be screwed.
Yeah, we could go all day about that. Astoria, John Jacob Astor choosing where he placed his new settlement in Astoria and all the old architecture there. Yeah, for sure. I think this entire realm is terraformed. But I think the most obvious examples that have been on my mind recently have been the Yucatan and Florida, and just the sea level and how they're completely flat, and the spring water that comes out of nowhere. It was all very intelligently designed to support millions of people. But yeah.
You've seen the Ritz-Carlton in Half Moon Bay, right?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. So here's that, and you zoom in a bit, and then here's your example, and then boom, here comes all this stuff coming up. So
didn't they cover that up or take it away or something? What they did something?
Yeah, they destroyed it. They took it all down.
They destroyed it, did they? Yeah.
They couldn't cover it up because they knew the ocean would just reveal it again, so they just demolished it all.
Nice.
But imagine how far underground it goes.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
It's like that picture of the Great Hall of Paris where it literally goes down, God knows, like 10 stories. You just see it and just levels and levels and levels.
Oh, yeah, when they were building the subway.
Yeah.
Same thing in New York City. When they were digging out the subways, even though the article isn't saying that, they were finding boats, full ships.
Yeah.
Underground. And that's not the only one I found. I have ships underground all over the place. In caves. I have caves where they have full standing forests, 900-foot tall trees in a cave.
In a cave?
In America, yeah. There were caves here in America that would just blow your mind. I mean, unbelievable. And they don't exist, or they're in national parks, or they were flooded with dams. Damming is really one of the biggest ways to shut out a people from exploring a region that they don't want anyone going in. And, the Colorado River in Utah, Arizona, that's a really good example, which maybe we'll get time to cover that last little article. So I'll just sum this up so we have a little time to get to that article about the race of people living in Arizona who were Egyptians. The most important part of this article is, where was it? The builders, the Jackson News thinks, were some prehistoric race. It could not be otherwise. The structure is supposed to be a continuation of the Great Chinese Wall, which seems to begin below Raymond in the southern part of Hinds County, and which is traceable through Copia and is broad enough to accommodate 2 or 3 wagons abreast. That's on top of it. So this wall is so wide that you can run. It's a perfectly flat road, and you could have 3 carriages wide on top. And when they dug down, they couldn't even find the bottom. They went more than 40 feet deep. The wall got wider, just like star forts do, and the stones got bigger, just like most of this Cyclopean construction found across the world. He calls it the Brandywine Stone Wall and says that the wonderful massive structure are parts of the structure of masonry done in stone, which have withstood the ravages of time for perhaps many thousands of years, still stand an enduring relic of a prehistoric civilization and a knowledge of the art of building not inferior in many respects to the present day. These stone buildings lie for the most part buried in the earth in the southeastern portion of Claiborne County and lying against the Copia. So it goes on to say that this wall literally controls the way that the Mississippi flows. Because if you look at river maps, the Mississippi has changed its course like most big rivers do. Right. They naturally just create new courses over flooding and receding. This wall has kept it from encroaching. So
Mississippi, right.
The Mississippi is the river Isis, is the Nile.
There's another really good, I gotta quickly say, because thinking about Columbus looking for India, he wasn't looking for India. Like all the references I've found, he's looking for Tartary. And if you find, I think, the discovery of America as an outgrowth of conquering the Moors, published in 1883, that says, Christopher Columbus was born about the year 1435 in the city of Genoa, et cetera, et cetera. Marco Polo, Venetian, during his journey eastward overland in the 12th century, et cetera, formed the conclusion that if Marco Polo reached India, the kingdom of Grand Tartary, the kingdom of the Grand Khan of Tartary, could be reached by traveling eastward. And he could certainly reach the opposite coast of India by sailing westward. So the Grand Khan of Tartary is the main stamp of, the Great Wall of China. They like to say Tartar City and the connections to the Tartars, which is a more recent thing because the wall wasn't there at some point, allegedly. So...
or buried or uncovered. Yeah, and I have hypothesized, and I have some pretty good articles about Marco Polo actually landed in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, not in China.
Right.
And, it's not even, whether or not, his stories are conjecture, of course, but what is corroborated is that he only told half the story. So I think it's either that the full story is that his explorations were here in America, or the other half is that that's what he's keeping. But yeah.
How big this empire was, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, and, the Grand Khan, Prester Khan, Prester John, Prester Janus. I mean, we could go all day with the connections there, just in the names. But Cathay being his kingdom and his capital. And if you find the right maps, Cathay is right where, Illinois, quote unquote, Egypt of America is located. And Chicago was called the White City, and his capital in Peking was called the White City. We could go all day there, but that'll get us off topic. But yeah, so this just kind of covers a little bit more about the width of the wall, the size of the wall, the stones. It's just crazy. They don't have it. They can't build anything like it. And they can't find the bottom of it, basically, is what it symbolizes here. So those of you out there listening, you can follow me on Twitter or on Instagram and read these articles if you want to go through them yourself, or just reach out to me. It's a problem with having so much stuff as I get lost. So now we'll touch on the Great Wall of Texas. The Great Wall of Texas, prehistoric wall discovered on the frontier of the Lone Star State, passes through Milano, 20 miles long, built of solid masonry, 10 to 15 feet high. They actually went in as far down as 40 feet, just like the Mississippi Wall, and they never found the bottom of it. The crazy thing that I don't touch on in this article, but came out in an interview probably 4 or 5 years ago, they did a bunch of material samples on the wall and found that it was made of like 10 different crystalline sediments, and most of them, they don't exist in America. They're like from Pakistan and eastern parts of Europe. Parts of what constitutes titanium was found in this wall.
What? So
yeah.
Geopolymer?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Wow. Geopolymer with advanced crystalline. So when you dive into Atlantis, they were using crystals, and they were developing cities to fight off giant monsters, and some of their walls were quote unquote electrified. So I think that these walls were electric fences.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah, and that these crystalline walls, not only were they earthquake proof, just like those walls you see in Peru, and the Cyclopean constructions where all the bricks are different shaped, right? Because if you build all the same shape, they're super prone to falling apart during an earthquake, because they can just have so much lateral movement when you have that same symmetry. So when you build irregular shaped stone, it becomes a lot more stronger, and you find some of that in the bottom of this wall. So they hypothesized that this wall in Texas, that they think perhaps several different epochs of people built and added onto the wall, as perhaps multiple mud floods covered different sections of the wall. I won't know if I think it's probably the same people, and that's just how they did it to protect it. Just like building a wall, inclining in is going to help keep it together as well. Anyways, so yeah, this wall in Texas, same thing. This article's from 1893. By the 1850s, they had like 400 miles of this wall mapped, but they weren't telling anybody about it. So in this article, they've measured 20 miles of it, and like I said, same thing. They couldn't find the bottom of it. I have tons of articles about Mexico, where they have road systems, roads that go across the entire country lined with giant walls. I think it's a continuation of the same thing. And later on in this thread, this is when they first started flying over Peru with planes and taking photos of what they called the Great Wall of Peru. And it looks just like the Great Wall of China. And they measured thousands of miles of it. So I think these are all continuations of the same structure. As crazy as it is to wrap your mind around that, if we have a group of people that can build continents, or whole peninsulas like the Yucatan, building a wall like this wouldn't be very difficult. And you can only imagine how big this would really be if we're taking on 10, 20, 30, 40 feet of mud in certain events, perhaps multiple times. But yeah, we'll go back to this article, and I'll just kind of summarize it really quick. It passes through Milano, total length of 20 miles. It's built of solid masonry, 10 to 15 feet high. And like I said, as they went farther along, they went 40 plus feet and never found the bottom of it. Its height and thickness are thus almost as great as the famous Chinese wall. Most of it is underground. It puzzles wise men. Foundation of gigantic fortress. So that's fantastic, right? Because that kind of connects the star fort idea. When you see some of these star forts, a lot of them, and 13th Monkey has done a fantastic job, and Alchemist has talked about the walls that go all over Eastern Europe, Russia, Mongolia. 13th Monkey has undoubtedly proven this for me, that all these star forts, at least most of them, were connected by walls for multiple purposes. I think not only were they keeping out people, monsters, I think they were transporting gas, as well as liquids, perhaps oil. The Aztecs probably built the wall. I disagree with that. The inscriptions on it are a lost language, kindred of Indians inscription. On the hill, a mighty temple, 200 lofty pillars. So imagine how big a temple is. So this temple is connected to this wall, right? That's a gigantic fortress that goes on for 20 plus miles. And remember, they map another 100 plus miles of it later down the road. The mighty temple has 200 lofty pillars. Think of how big this would be. I mean, if you look at some of the Roman buildings with 200 pillars, this thing is gigantic. Inside were many idols, one of an owl. So who does the owl symbolize? Andreas, maybe you can answer that one.
The protector of ISIS. Keep
exactly.
secrets.
Yeah, which just is now we're connecting Assyria.
Also,
Egypt.
the answer is what, 123 licks to the center of a Tootsie Roll Pop? I think the owl tells us that.
Oh, that's true. Good point. Wow, yeah, that's fun. But anyways, I'll just read this. Human sacrifices, birds, beasts, reptiles, some very large skeletons, some petrified, idols curiously marked, stone fashioned to represent the Godhead. Interesting. The Godhead, the monad, built above the ground on a gigantic foundation.
After what Bernie said about Homo giganticus, now I have to wonder a bit more about the stellium connection there,
Oh, man. Stellium connection. It's, yeah.
And the Myctinium with 13th Monkey. It's all
for sure. Absolutely. Yeah. It's amazing how that small group, when I first met you, has really kind of.
We're how right we all were about a lot of stuff, huh?
Yeah,
I don't know.
We were just throwing around these crazy ideas and
not trying to toot horns, but dang, man.
Before your time.
Yeah, for sure.
Now it is their time.
Now the time.
One of 7 tribes, 7 caverns, 7 islands. If you study that number 7, it's quite interesting. It goes back to Atlantis. The 7 tribes are the 7 sleepers. The story that 7 groups or 7 sub-races, right, or root races came from underground during some kind of cataclysm. And the Aztec creation myth says the same thing. And you wouldn't believe how many different
and the Quechua and the Hopi and the Algonquin.
There we go. Yeah. How many different groups who have no connection with each other and from a race background have no connection with each other.
Also, the Aztecs are kind of like a concoction of like conquerors that came after the fall.
The Aztec is a false branding. 100%.
Right.
Yeah. It's just like the Mayan was a name concocted to cover up the ZZ or the Olmecs. And
the Olmecs.
The previous civilization there. Yeah, because the original Mecca was in Guatemala. And the
Olmeca? The Olmeca?
Yeah, exactly. And Mecca means to whirl. This takes us back to the lodestone.
What about Yule Mecca? Because the tree, because also the giant tree, right?
Yeah. Yuletide.
Yeah.
Roll Tide, Alabama. Yeah, we can go all day there. But anyways, wandered after a confusion of tongues. We got the Babel story again, which I think the Babel story or the falling of the tower was the falling of the vapor canopy, which could be also related to the division of the brain, the bicameral mind.
The beginning of language, maybe.
Correct. Yeah, as we know it today, phonetics are spoken word. Perhaps it was more of a psychically conveyed language. I don't know. But language being what I was talking about earlier, there's a lot of anomalies with language that seem like we were genetically engineered to start speaking verbal language as we know it today versus perhaps in the past we weren't. Established a very enlightened form of government, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, I'm just trying to summarize stuff because I know
monkeys don't have the same vocal cords, but you know what do? Reptiles, dinosaurs, birds, right? The birds, like you can hear a parrot or toucan speak like a human and sing, but like a monkey can't do it.
And they can learn more words.
And we've got this weird posable like lizard like thing. It's a lot going on with humans.
Yeah, the pineal gland, which originates in reptiles. That's a weird one too.
I mean, this is like so huge and it's amazing. I'm so grateful that you're connecting the dots and connecting the star forts with the 13th monkey walls. And just again, remembering the Great Wall of Tartary, because we think of the Great Wall of China, but again, it was called Tartaria for a lot of the books that we find that mention it. And there you go.
Yeah. And the Manchu, which connects back to Mexico, and the Olmecs and the Manchu Tartars, which is a lot of what we know as Chinese culture is based off the Manchus, and their history is incredibly interesting. Um, there are pyramids all over Mexico that have Chinese hieroglyphics on them, so strengthening the Olmec connection, because like I said, the Olmec didn't call themselves Olmec, they were called the Zizi or the Zi, and the first dynasty of China was right,
or Shin,
yeah, and many of the Manchu connections can be found all over Mexico. Not only
and
that,
in Portland and Seattle, you got the Haida have all of those totems which use their symbology, and
they were digging up graves under trees of Manchus and Japanese all along the west coast of America. But yeah, I'll get off topic. Alchemist left, but I wanted to let him. I know we're getting low on time, so
I'm still here.
Steer away, brother. I'll just ramble.
Well, right.
It's all great.
It's fascinating. I didn't know about the Great Wall that goes along the Mississippi there. I did know a bit about the one in Texas, but it's sounding almost pretty identical to the giant one that runs across all of, I think, northern Siberia. And then that's a completely different wall.
And Alaska.
And Alaska, really.
Yeah, wow. The entire division of Alaska from what they called Canada at the time is a giant wall in mounds and walls. Right. And remember, Alaska was completely tropical not too long ago. And I have Grecian stone cities found in Alaska. Giants,
right?
Tropical, amazing. I mean, Alaska is an amazing bridge to what we've been talking about on this already.
And Nova Angelis was the capital. Nova Angelisk. So the giant angels, the new angels,
Yeah, and big Moorish connection.
The coastline of Alaska pretty much looks man-made, as well as a lot of the Northwest Territories and pretty much everywhere.
Well, what's interesting is we look at a lot of these mountains, and 13th Monkey's also shown pretty good evidence that there's a lot of mountain ranges that are just broken walls that are really giant walls as well. But what I like is that these are all examples that nobody's going to – I mean, I can't say nobody, but so few people are really able to dispute this. How are you going to hide, actual stone masonry? It's there, and deal with it.
Yeah. One of my articles, which, again, I could go all day with that, but there was an earthquake in Alaska in the 1880s, and it tore asunder a whole side of a mountain. It just, washed off the side of a cliff, essentially. And inside of it was this gigantic, what they called at the time, Grecian city. And all of the stone was perfectly hewn stone. So you can just imagine, this realm, as I've hypothesized many times, was covered with billions of people living in huge cities everywhere. There's no part of the realm that wasn't covered.
There's an Alaskan military installation, which it was a nuclear tower. It's like a skyscraper behind a mountain, and you have to drive through the mountain in order to get to it. And now they just have some humans. I call them that, but I guess citizens.
Yeah, the apartment building.
Right.
It makes no sense. Oh, it's for fishing. All these people are fishermen. No, they're not.
Dude, they're all Polynesian. Come on, like the Aboriginal sailor
Mormons.
Did
you know that Mormonism?
How are we supposed to stop right now, Ben? What are you doing to me?
Mormonism is the predominant religion in that little weird society.
We need to do this again, and you can't make this some triannual event. We're gonna have to come back and talk about Mormonism and Polynesia just as the beginning of things. Are you kidding me?
Oh man, the language, Laird Scranton, his book on the Polynesians and the Maori is fantastic.
And then the Maori ate the Mariwari, which were pygmies. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, and they were fighting giant monsters. Which really quick before I go,
Really quick,
because
show
I
us a couple
could.
of these giant
Let's
monsters.
You don't have to go.
Well, you know what I mean.
You got a family, I understand. We got to do it again though.
We're at 2 hours. We can do it again. Yeah,
Absolutely. Within a
Let's call
week's time, though.
yeah,
I mean,
not
Christmas
now.
coming. Yeah.
I have
It's
this
almost
great
Christmas
article
on
about the
next year.
pygmies. in-
Right. Hey, look at Janice. Good to see you, Janice. Yeah.
Here we go. Hunting a live prehistoric monster. This is from Mississippi, 1910. One of the most remarkable scientific discoveries ever made in the wilds of New Guinea. A marvelous race of pygmies, a monster mammal larger than an elephant named the Gazika, wrought havoc against the pygmies. Look at this thing.
What the heck? A Papuan devil pig?
No,
A giant guinea pig?
This
Devil
is
tiger pig. It's a man bear pig.
yeah. But yeah, the
Campbell,
person who
you're
writes
right.
this article travels all the way there and gets to witness one of these attacking a pygmy city. And he's
Is
just
this
the thing's
from
just
Ripley?
ripping the pygmies out of their huts.
Is
Eating
this
I
them
like
from
whole.
the
Rip-
picture of the
is-
skull with the skull in its mouth at the
Is
bottom,
this
just
from
to show you
Ripley's
how
Believe
big
It or Not?
it is. In the
No, this is from
mouth.
1910, and I have quite a few of these.
Wow, man.
I have some good ones from Alaska.
So, I mean, this is basically just megafauna leftovers from the vapor
Correct.
canopy. Yeah.
Yep.
Because we went to Rockhampton a few weeks ago, and the story of the guy who founded it, apart from everything else he did, he captured a 7-meter crocodile. Actually, I think he found it dead, but 7 meters, that's a big crocodile, man.
Right. There's no rule to make it stop growing, right?
Yeah, and connecting Old World Florida in Arabic coins. I have an interesting article from New Jersey from the late 1800s. They were digging pylons for a new building, and 30 feet below ground, they found a 40-foot-long alligator. And below it, they found a skeleton of a man and an Arabic coin with the date J672 on it, with Arabic letters on it.
Wow.
So, yeah.
40 foot. Wow.
So here's another good one really quick just to touch on since we got on that. But giant saurian of the Arctic emerges as big as 10 elephants, passed like a hurricane across the frozen river, smashing thick blocks of ice into the air, bristled hair, immense red eyes. It was carrying a 700-pound caribou in its mouth. I think I have a picture farther down. Here we go. So it's a lizard, essentially, but it has hair. And it's carrying a caribou. And they say it crosses the Aleutian Islands between Siberia and Alaska because the people in Siberia have the exact same drawing of the same creature. Is it the same creature or multiple? I don't know. But they say it lives in caves and hibernates, and it comes out every 10 years. Hibernates for 10 years. Stocks up on food and goes underground. But yeah.
There's if you look at again at reptiles, like let me just really quickly grab for two seconds. I know we're about to end, but just for a second, because if you look at birds, which are again dinosaurs, and you look at what they have and the prototypical feather that devolved into a feather, it looks like most of the birds, that we look at, we find that they did have hair, just like that.
Yeah, it is hair-like, yeah.
And
Yeah, I mean, because if you're taking an animal like that and putting it in an Arctic environment, it's going to develop hair.
There's a mutagen they found that's the reason that the hair turns into a feather, like it sprays outwards, and it's also because of some protein deficiency, which causes the lizard to stop shedding, right? Because you shed a whole skin, so instead it frays outward. Yeah, molting.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But yeah, so before I get off topic, is there anything else you want to cover?
I mean, you got me with the Gazika, and what's the name of the giant thing here? This giant lizard?
I'll just tell you that they just called it a giant saurian of the Arctic.
Oh, a saurian,
and you know what's great about this one? What's great about this one is the Duke of Westminster traveled all the way to Alaska to hunt this. So that's pretty crazy because you can find a ton on this article I was able to corroborate with through so many sources.
So all royals feel like they have to kill off the last of the megafauna. That's what they do. We see all the pictures of them killing elephants in Botswana.
Oh man. Yeah, and what's his name? Roosevelt. He traveled the world killing.
Love killing stuff. Love killing.
Pandas, giant sloths.
Didn't matter what, just love killing.
Yeah. Roosevelt was a monster. There's another.
Darwin liked to eat endangered species.
The Smithsonian was offering a $5 million bounty in the 1800s for a dinosaur in the Congo. $5 million in the
Mbembe,
1800s.
I'm pretty sure they got it and they just like kept it to themselves. That's what Mekele Mbembe turned out to be. It was like their Smithsonian secret.
Yeah. So I mean, I could go all day with the Smithsonian. I got hundreds on.
We'll get on about Smithson pretty soon. Yeah, Smithson was cool. That's too bad they took his organization from him.
Yep.
Guys, make sure you go to Twitter. Waking Up with Analog 1, Analog 9. That 19. Some of my David Ewing Jr. fans will get the 19 reference there. Although he did it a decade ago, at least. I don't know. You've been doing this forever. You're all about
12 years, yeah.
Yeah. So keep up with Waking Up with Analog. And also make sure that you guys are subscribed to his YouTube channel. I know you don't have a lot of videos there yet, but
big old 0.
All right. It's still worth it.
Well,
and then
we can do this one if you want.
Someday.
Right. And yeah, make sure you're subscribed to Autodidactic if you're watching on my channel, and also to Crypto Alchemist.
Yes. And Andreas, of course, you'll find links below on my channel and no doubt on everyone else's. So share the love.
But
we gotta get back and do this again really soon. I don't know, after Christmas sometime. Let's try to get you and I'll talk again to Dr. Longo and see if we can do something, because it'd be great to do some more world Florida, world history, Mesoamerica studies.
Dude, you should see the list of video ideas that me and Longo have already come up with that we want to try to make time for. But I mean, I've been trying to get on with you for 6 months.
It's true.
I was barely able to make this happen. So
I'm going every day. You'll find a day. Just when you see a wave, you get on the wave. I don't know if you surf, but that's
maybe next time, Campbell, you can have some more questions for me. And because I cover quite a wide range of topics, and I've loved your videos.
Sure.
So if there's anything particular you want to focus on, and we didn't even cover the main article that I was going to show, Alchemist, which is the wonderful ethnological discovery. Egypt. This is in Arizona. 2 miners. I'll just give a quick synopsis, and the next time we get together, we'll cover this article. 2 miners get lost, and they stumble into an Egyptian civilization in Arizona. It's a crazy, wonderful story. It's the Kincaid article, which everyone knows about the Kincaid article, right? In the Egypt in Arizona, but it's times a million.
Yeah.
And this area was covered after the Hoover Dam was built. So you can only imagine.
Now everybody go back to sleep.
You can only imagine what damming has done.
Oh, brother, where art thou? We're going to have to also look at the weird sigils built upon the dam and how it's a wet dam that hasn't been dried yet. It's pretty interesting.
And all the people that were sacrificed building it.
Right. Like the Great Wall of China or Tartary.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
All right.
But yeah. Pleasure.
Nice black pill at the end there. I appreciate that. That was good.
Yeah. Well, if you follow me, you can read it. So hopefully that'll attract some new people. If not, we'll cover it on the next time we all get together.
Just trying to find your Twitter page, but I'm not logged in through my proper Twitter, so I'm struggling. I'm sorry.
Waking up with Analog on Twitter and Instagram, right?
It's right there at the top. You see it. That there. He's looking at it. That's Waking Up with Analog.
I've only just got on Instagram, so there's only 100 posts, but I have almost 7,000 posts on Twitter over the last 12 years. So lots of stuff there.
Guys, get on there and share it around. Let's get the info out. And thank you for everyone who's been with us. 550 of you watching across the 3 or 4 channels we got going. So thank you all. And we'll reconvene this probably next year, 2023, man. Almost Christmas. Oh my God.
Right after Janus, Kay. Remember, January 1st was moved to the new year to celebrate Janus.
Celebrate Janus. Looking forward and looking back. Woo-hoo.
Yep, exactly. Yep. What do we do on January 1st?
What do we do? Yeah, make the resolutions. Is that right?
Exactly.
We'll plan out the next year as we look
Phase
forward.
Yeah.
Right.
Learn from the past.
Learn from the past. Hopefully.
Hopefully.
Well,
a lot of
that's
learning
what
to be done at the
all about.
moment.
Yeah.
Bringing great minds together and working together to make the future a better place by understanding the past and sharing knowledge.
There we go. All right, some nice Bernie philosophy to take us out. So thanks, everyone. Stay awesome, and we'll talk to you all on the next upload. Bye for
Ta-ta.
now.